Hello everyone and welcome back to another Planet Zoo 2 video where today we're going to be going over some improvements to zoo management and some environmental conditions that I think Planet Zoo 2 could really use to help improve the game overall. So first of which is seasons. So seasons is something that of course occurs naturally, but it's something that isn't really incorporated into Planet Zoo because, well, plants generally look the same over the course of the year, and also weather conditions can often appear when they're not really supposed to. So I think the incorporation of seasons like autumn, winter, spring and summer would be really good ways to affect management of your zoos, but also affect the appearance of your zoo depending on where you place it. Certain weather conditions that occur, so in autumn you'll have the leaves that will be falling from temperate trees, and in winter large amounts of snowfall depending on where your zoo is, and in spring blooming of flowers. Summer it just gets hot. Animals will spend more time in water, but there are also a few environmental conditions that I would like to talk about as well. So weather related and seasonal challenges is something that seasons can affect and make the location you are building in have a more direct effect on your zoo rather than making it look pretty, with different regions and biomes warranting specific weather conditions and possible natural disasters that can damage parts of your zoo in different ways, like high winds, knocking over bins, benches, foliage, and seasonally staff would have to deal with snowfall and autumnal leaves that cover the paths, cover buildings, and just make the environment around and within the zoo just feel a lot more alive. A day and night cycle should also factor into your day count for every year in the zoo, with every cycle being one day that just counts on. That way seasons can last longer in zoos, as well as animals also last longer, with animals that have short lifespans such as the Tasmanian devil currently passing within what feels like a couple of days. This would allow players to become a lot more attached to them, as the animals can remain a part of the zoo for a lot longer, and also mean that you don't have to replace them so quickly, and overall just make it feel a lot more realistic and allow you to do more in a certain time. And there is another feature that I'll be talking about that can also be incorporated into this system. A working backstage area is something that is very important for Planet Zoo 2 to me, as they are crucial to how animals are housed in zoos in real life, as animals aren't just kept in the habitat the whole time. So they often have night quarters or seasonal quarters, or even just brought backstage when keepers are in the habitat. More on that later. This is also where animals are generally introduced to an enclosure, where they're kept to get used to the environment that they are being housed in, and overall just a safe place for keepers to interact with certain species. And it would be also a great way to incorporate a whole range of systems like working gates and doors to keep animals in there if you need to. So if, for example, it's winter and you have animals that are made for the savannah, like say a cheetah, you don't really want to put it out in the main habitat while it's too cold. So you keep it in there where it's warm and safe. And yeah, that's sort of the system I'm going for here, is just have a working backstage area where all sorts of different interactions happen between the keepers and the animals, and also just dynamics in how animals are housed. It's also where sort of joining can occur. So joining is basically when animals are put together for breeding, and so you can control which animals go together to breed. So you can actually make sure that your most fertile female, for example, is going together with the male that you have selected for a breeding program, and so that way you have complete control over which animals are breeding, and so you're not you're not making animals breed that have a low fertility rating, and so you can more reliably have better offspring for your breeding programs. And breeding programs overall is something that I think would be really great, in that you get extra points for breeding certain animals, and just your understanding and husbandry techniques can improve your zoo rating for certain endangered species. Now, something I mentioned in a previous video is an animal aggression system. So this would basically come in several levels, where the most docile animals are safe for keepers to enter the habitat, safe for staff to be there, where the animal isn't going to pose any danger. This would be basically for animals like red pandas, or dik-diks, little penguins. These animals that are generally smaller, shy, not very aggressive, and generally keep to themselves and mind their own business. And so they would be safe for staff to enter the habitats. What's unrealistic right now is keepers entering the habitats with animals like hippos, polar bears, tigers, lions, jaguars, saltwater crocodiles. That would really only have to happen if, like, say your staff are well trained for certain animals. Like, there are several examples I could think of where keepers will enter the habitat with saltwater crocodiles. That's generally to feed them for crocodile shows. But those keepers have been trained for working with crocodilians, and so that could be an interesting way to incorporate how animals, how keepers can enter the animals' habitats if those animals are a more dangerous kind. And so even like hippos, if you keep a respectable, good long distance away from any hippos, you technically can be in the habitat for a keeper. This is no one just go and try this. Please do not go and try that. But yeah, I think this would be a great way to just realize some of the animals and just how many animals are not safe to just enter the habitat with, especially polar bears, because polar bears are literally one of those animals that hunts human beings for food. And hippos are generally the animal in Africa that's most likely to attack you. But yeah, that's basically how the system would work. Animals have a certain rating, and depending on that rating, they'll be housed in the backstage area or not while keepers and staff are in the habitat. I think that would be a great system. Another great system that would be very helpful, particularly in large zoos, like where it's not just a small zoo that the staff can just walk around and do stuff, but zoos that are big enough and have enough stuff to do that staff vehicles are warranted. So these would take the form of, say, like a ute or a golf cart, those sort of things, to help staff just get around the zoo quicker, and also to transport stuff like food much faster, and even transport animals if the animals are small enough to be carried in the back of, say, the ute. I think this would just be a really great system and would be so helpful for like making safari parks and just realistic zoos in general, because when a staff member has to go feed giraffes, for example, they're not just walking there. They're often in a vehicle to get there, and also to transport the food necessary to feed them, like these keepers at the Auckland Zoo, as you can see, delivering browse for the giraffes. And so that is the sort of system that I want to see. And on the same note as the vehicles, specific zoo roads, which would sort of be the zoo staff paths that we currently have, but vehicles are generally kept to these, and different vehicles would warrant different sizes of path. So if you need like a truck to get in to deliver large animals to an enclosure, you'd need to accommodate that. And habitat gates for vehicles would also be another aspect you'd have to incorporate. So habitat gates that are big enough that a car can get through to go out into a larger habitat. That's sort of what I'm going for. Like it would of course be a little bit more in depth than what I can say right now, but it would just be so useful because keepers take so long right now in big zoos. Like, even though you can set up a work zone, it's not often that you see staff facilities actually really close to exhibits in safari parks, at least from what I've seen. So like, the staff facilities are kept to a certain area, and then they spread, and then the staff go out in their vehicles from there and deliver stuff that needs to be delivered. Now, like, that's just what I've seen. But yeah, it would just be a really good way of allowing staff to get to certain areas quicker, especially if you're like creating a naturalistic area where you don't want any buildings in like direct visibility of guests. So yeah, like that's just something I've been thinking about. Another thing is improved lighting. Now, this is something that I expect to arrive in the game thanks to Planet Coaster 2, which has got some incredible lighting in the game. And yeah, like you can see the reflections on the water, for one. That's really great. But also, buildings can actually be dark. So nocturnal houses, reptile houses, they're going to be much easier to construct with this improved lighting. Like, I remember Leaf, he was going through a video that was focusing on some of the features in Planet Coaster 2 that can be added to Planet Zoo 2, and the lighting was one of them. He constructed a basic building, went inside, it was so dark, and the light was just so concentrated. It wasn't just this this dampened light cutting through the building materials. It was actually blocked off, and so yeah, that's something I'm really excited to see. More specific and realistic veterinary care and a quarantine system would be really good, because it doesn't quite work how it does in Planet Zoo 1, because vets and different tasks that need to be carried out for certain animals are just not really a thing in Planet Zoo. So Planet Zoo 2, you could have where a baby animal is born, it is taken in for a health check to make sure it's in peak condition, healthy. The eyes are not irregular, like its weight's good, and even for adult animals, they do have sort of monthly health checks or yearly health checks for some species, and so they're brought into the vet clinic to have a good look over, see if there's anything irregular going on that the keepers haven't noticed, or any of the sort. But more specific veterinary care would also be stuff like dental health. Like, animals need to go to the dentist as much as we do, because sometimes they could break a tooth, they could get a tooth infection, a gum infection, all that sort of stuff. And so being able to have that sort of thing in Planet Zoo 2 would be really great. And also that it's not just one vet doing all this. There's multiple team members that go into ensuring a procedure goes through smoothly. And I think that would just be a really good way to improve the veterinary surgery, is having a team of both the vet and several other veterinarians, making sure everything's in place, but also that the animals are set up in a realistic manner, where like they have the anesthesia, they have like blindfolds, they're on like cushioning, like towels and such, that sort of thing. And there's just like a lot more equipment around, because there is a lot of equipment around in a vet surgery for zoos. And some animals shouldn't really be brought into the vet surgery at all. So some animals, this is how the backstage system can also work, in that it's where some of the larger animals have their veterinary care. So stuff like your elephants and rhinos, you're not just going to bring those into the vet surgery because they're huge, right? So it's best to just do the procedure in a backstage area with those animals. And so yeah, that's sort of my idea of how it can be improved. Realistic animal transport is another thing that I really want to see in Planet Zoo 2, because I do not like the look of just keepers carrying around a massive wooden box that just drops the animals off in the habitat. I would really much prefer animals being transported in trailers and carts and crates that are accurate to their size, but also are just more realistic, because keepers cannot just run around a zoo carrying around a box that's got like an African bush elephant in it. So having a more realistic system for that would be great. And this transport system can also incorporate into the backstage system, where the animals are dropped off to a gate that leads into the backstage area. And so that way the animals are kept in there for a quarantine period and then are released into the habitat. And so, yeah, there's just a lot of realistic things that can be incorporated in Planet Zoo, make it more managerial. And yeah, like I know a few people have mentioned more realistic transport, but yeah, it is something that I think is really important for the game. Guests dressing appropriately for different environments and weather conditions. Now this applies to the seasons, but also the location of your zoo. So I know I've been in the Arctic maps over my time playing Planet Zoo, and guests have shown up in t-shirts and shorts. And I'm just like, you fools! Like, the guests need to be dressed appropriately for the zoo they're going to, and also for the weather conditions. So if they go to a zoo that's stationed in the Arctic, they should have a big thick woolly jumper on, and long pants and boots and gloves and mittens, beanies and scarves, all this sort of stuff to keep them warm. And if they're in a hot place, t-shirts and shorts, or longer clothes that are just flannel, like thin, just to keep you sheltered from the sun, but also cool at the same time. And yeah, this is a minor thing, but something that I feel like can be easily fixed. Now, something that was mentioned by my fellow Planet Zoo creator, Charlie X Gaming. If you haven't seen his channel, I do recommend checking it out. One of his ideas was to have the births and pregnancies of the animals be a much bigger deal to the zoo itself and to the player as the zoo's manager, as they are in real life. Because yeah, if an animal is being born, there are all sorts of preparations that go into it, all sorts of procedures that are necessary to ensure the mother is healthy and the unborn offspring are healthy. So one aspect being the animals are visibly pregnant, for one. Animals should be showing different behaviours, such as becoming more laborious as the due date gets closer, as well as staff being a lot more attentive to the expecting mothers, ensuring their welfare is tip-top, and certain animals requiring isolation away from the rest of the social group, which would work hand in hand with the backstage system with specific holding pens where the mother is kept and her soon-to-be born offspring safe and secure and healthy, and that way they get a chance to bond, and over time they are eventually reintroduced to the main herd or social group that they live in. And in certain animals, the male is also kept separate from the babies, as you don't often see two parent tigers looking after the cubs. It's generally only the tigress. And some animals do require certain requirements. So back when the southern white rhinoceros was in a heap of trouble, like on the brink of extinction, zoos were trying to breed them, but they couldn't find out how until it was discovered that southern white rhinos, they breed best when a female is in a group of other females, and so surrounded by peers, they worked that out, and that's why you see a lot of female southern white rhinos in groups, because yeah, like that's how you're going to successfully breed them, is if they are in a crash. And also vets, when the babies are born, they're taken to the vet surgery one day to have a health check done, make sure that they are healthy, they've been born healthy without any injuries or any illnesses post-birth. And so that would just be a really great way of making them a bigger deal. And this would incorporate into another part of the management system I'll discuss a little bit later, where the zoo actually advertises this in a social media tab. So this was another idea that Charlie X Gaming brought up, and I will get into that just in a little bit later. So another thing that has been mentioned is a proper capture mode. So capture mode is something that exists in the Jurassic World Evolution games and is really handy for getting great shots. like in the first one, getting great shots of dinosaurs in rain, or in the second one, able to like get perfect shots of hunts, and in the third one you'll be getting all sorts of the same stuff, but with better graphics. But yeah, this would be a great thing to incorporate into Planet Zoo 2 and really allow players to create real cinematic scenes and be able to just capture it in a very cinematic way. And yeah, also you'd have the ability to have fast movement and slow movement, so yeah, you have complete control over how the camera looks, and I think, yeah, that would just be great. And being able to take these photos, save them in the game itself for that zoo, would also incorporate it into the social media tab, as these photos that the player takes can then be uploaded to like the zoo's feed or something like that. A working first-person mode is, I mean, we technically do have it. First-person mode is something that does exist in Planet Zoo, but make it a bit more fleshed out in the sense that you can be a keeper or you can be a guest. And so if you're a keeper, or even just any other staff member, or just as your zoo manager self, you're able to complete tasks around the zoo. So you're able to clean up rubbish, you're able to rake leaves if the seasonal system's implemented. You're able to restock feeders, restock enrichment, interact with animals, have an animal encounter if you wanted to. You could ride the tour vehicles, like you actively get onto the vehicle, and yeah, that would just be incredible. That would be a great way to really flesh out the game, and also allow players to be more attached to their zoos as they get to walk around in them and be able to appreciate from the guest's perspective, this is what I've built, this is what I've created, it's amazing, I'm so proud of it. That's the feeling that we're currently kind of missing, is that players will build zoos, but they can't really be properly attached to them. As you build them, and you're happy with the habitat you built, but you can't really interact with it as a zoo more than just a creation. So I think that would be a really great way of allowing players to be much more attached to the zoo itself, and just make it feel a lot more like it's theirs. And yeah, like, it's something I really want to see. Now, apologies for the blurry image, but this is that social media system that Charlie Ace Gaming and Leaf have also brought up. So this social media feature, as so many zoos utilize it in real life to advertise events at the zoo, new babies, any new animals arriving to the zoo, etc. Guests would even be able to submit photos they took around the zoo to the zoo's feed, and the zoo can use this as extra marketing. And as I stated, the capture mode could also be incorporated here, with players able to take photos to actively promote their zoos and the events occurring within it. It's a feature that shouldn't negatively, and like, being able to advertise your zoo as an active zoo manager would be really great, and just be realistic too, because zoos do advertise themselves on social media. Like, I follow several zoos, and so you see all sorts of stuff, like animals going in for health checks, new events happening at the zoo soon, so like Christmas, Easter, Halloween events, those sort of things, new animals, baby animals, that sort of thing. All that should be advertised in like the zoo feed. And Charlie's Gaming also stated as being a way to, interact with like your zoo friends. So any friends you have that also play Planet Zoo, interact with them. A way to see the animals that you have in your zoo. And yeah, it would be a really great feature, and it shouldn't negatively affect the zoo rating too much if you don't partake in it. It shouldn't be something that you have to do, as especially considering not the whole player base would want to be as active of a manager as others, and so making it a flexible feature would be really great for every kind of player. Zoo maps is something that we can't really create unless you take the time to go into Photoshop and make one yourself. But this would just be a way for you to have a zoo map in your zoo, and you're actually able to do it in the game, where you're able to get a bird's eye view and create your own zoo map, and you can use the animal icons to show where certain animals are in your zoo that much easier. And also just have this displayed around as its own item. So zoo map, it takes you into a specific camera system where it takes you above the zoo and shows you where everything is. I think that would just be really cool and very useful to just create a map that you can see the zoo you have, and also allow you to analyze any areas that you think could be improved, or isolate areas that you think could be used for a major project, like that sort of thing. I think that would be really great to see. So better security staff is another thing Charlie X Gaming brought up, and the seasons were as well. But security do not just roam around a huge zoo. So they stay within certain areas and are alerted if something is going on, and they need to deal with it, and so beeline for the issue instead of roaming around when they don't have to. They could just stay at a post and remain there until, say, a routine break, in which they are able to retire to the staff room and another guard takes their place until they're ready to go back on shift. Like, that would just be really realistic, because guards generally just stay in areas of like high population of guests to make sure stuff is going smoothly, no one's doing the wrong thing, all that sort of stuff, pardon me. And yeah, and another good way of incorporating a better security system is a surveillance room facility, as for some odd reason almost all the other staff, aside from the caretakers and educators, have dedicated facility buildings, and a surveillance room is something all zoos have to monitor cameras, and would be the main point of call that assigns security guards to an issue detected around the zoo. Routine animal feeding times is another thing that I think is really important for the game, so that keepers are not just they're not just feeding the animals willy-nilly. So animals at zoos are fed at specific times, so they're not just being given food as if it was on a conveyor belt. So animals are fed at certain times with different quantities to ensure that they're well fed, but also spaced out, so that it's not just a whole bunch of food and then boom, done. It allows them to get different portions of food throughout the day, and this would be a great way to have keepers better manage their time, where if it's not coming up to an animal's specific feeding time, keepers can do other tasks. They're not just making the food and not like cleaning up the habitat, for instance, or refilling water bowls or that sort of thing. So it just gives them more to do, but also less need to be doing stuff that they don't have to. Staff should also have their priorities straight. So this is something that has really bugged me over the years, because like until Charlie's Gaming brought it up in his video, it was something I was thinking of, but then that someone else was also noticing this, I thought I'd bring it up too, because staff can be infuriating sometimes. You'll have animals that are starving to death, and the staff are, where are the staff? Where are the keepers? What are they doing? And like, you can actually have a drop down menu to tell staff what they could do, but it should be as simple as staff can be able to do everything, but also have their priorities straight. When an animal needs to be fed, they prioritize that. When water needs to be refilled, they need to prioritize that. If they have the time to clean up the dung, that can be done at a certain time. And this is also a way that zoo closure times could be worked into the day and night cycle. So your zoo is open for a certain amount of time. Once the guests leave, the animals are taken off exhibit. The keepers go in, they clean up all the poo that's been left there. They do that at a certain time. They don't just do it when animals are starving. I think that's a feature that I think is necessary, because even though currently I feel like it's a simple fix to the current game, but I think it can be evolved from there. And the zoo vehicles would definitely help with this, allowing staff to move around much faster and easier than they currently do. and having the ability to call the keeper for a specific task should also be an option, as just calling the keeper would just get them to do any task. And yeah, I think this alternative would be much more versatile, as you can just call them for a specific task, or you have them do tasks at different times. So animal feeding times, that's in the schedule. When you clean up the dung, that's for before and after zoo opening times. And restocking drinking basins is something that just needs to be done all the time. And yeah, like, it would just make them so much less infuriating and feel like they're actually doing their jobs right. More activities for staff to do would also be a great new feature, especially for the caretakers, as caretakers generally do a lot more than just sweep the paths, clean the bins. They often do raking, so if we have fall leaves, they'll rake them up. They'll shovel snow, leaf blowing, lawn mowing, and yeah, like, zoos have to maintain the lawn as much as you do at your home. Replanting in enclosures, so plants should not just be there all the time. Animals do destroy plants, and weather can do that too. Plants can die, so replacing plants that have disappeared would be really good, and that would work into something I'll talk about in a bit. And other stuff like this would make staff feel like a fundamental part of the zoo that are more actively involved in its maintenance and quality, as they don't just do all these sort of small tasks. They do other things to maintain the zoo. They clean the toilets as well. Like, people, the guests don't do that, the staff have to do that, and so that is something that I think should be in there. But I mean, generally you don't see inside the restrooms anyway, so like, it is just a blank space. So like, simple as just a caretaker, walk in, walking out, clean. That's all that needs to be done. But yeah, there's all sorts of stuff that needs to be done to maintain a zoo, and I think having more activities for certain staff would be really cool to see. Other ways of accessing specific exhibits, like island enclosures for primates, would be really good, with staff using a small boat or a raft to access the habitat, without having a habitat gate or barrier obstructing the naturalistic look of the islands, because creating islands is difficult currently. Creating realistic islands is really difficult, because you can't do it without a habitat gate to access the island. And so keepers just using a boat instead would be really great, because I mean, I've done a lemur encounter before at a zoo, where the keeper took me on the boat and got me to the island where the lemurs were being housed, and exit the boat and meet the lemurs. So that's something that I think needs to be incorporated, because yeah, like, you don't just have a path going to the habitat and these massive walls blocking the lemurs off from actually escaping. So having a boat option would be really cool and more realistic. Now, this is another big one. So, a feature that I have thought of that might be cool and would work well with the day and night cycle that forms the year is realistic habitat construction. This feature would play out when the player has built the habitat with all the pieces and elements they wanted to include. So like, that aspect doesn't change. What does change is this habitat design is then submitted for construction, and it gradually takes form over the course of the year. So habitats don't just appear, and so different builds require more time to construct than others. This would be a good way to implement engineers and construction workers as a new staff type to build the habitats in a realistic fashion. In the process of construction, you could see like piles of materials that are going to be used, with the construction workers moving between the different pieces and completing different jobs around the construction site, and even have some machinery in there that would be used to make the habitat. As habitats in real life don't just appear, and so this could be a way to make the completion and grand opening of a habitat to visitors that bit more exciting and eventful, as they are in real life. Every time a zoo adds a new exhibit, it is a momentous event that is celebrated. As it completes construction, the animals are introduced and the exhibit is open for viewing. The overall cost to construct the habitat and the number of pieces used in it will determine how fast it is built in relation to the zoo's time. Now, size isn't really a factor, as many large paddocks that house hoof stock can be completed quite quickly, as they wouldn't really incorporate a lot of different pieces. But I think this would just be a really great way to make it that the habitats are something that is made over time, because, as I stated, they're not just something that appears when the player finishes making them. And so I think having a construction period would be really cool and just more realistic, and aspects of the habitat start to take shape as you get closer to its completion time. And I think that would just be so cool. It would be really cool to just see a habitat gradually take form when you've already built it. When you've built the design yourself, it's then constructed. Like, the habitat would be built where you've made it, because, well, you know where you wanted it, so that's how it's constructed. And I think that would just be, it would be really cool. But let me know your thoughts on this feature. Assigning specific areas of a zoo that connect a whole exhibition of different enclosures would make up a themed section of the zoo. As you can see on this map for the Columbus Zoo in the US, the maps are color-coded to different areas. And this is basically what I'm envisioning when I say that animals should be incorporated into different areas. And so the animals themselves, they're kept in their habitats, but the enclosures are identified as being part of a certain area. And so I think that would just be really good for, like, making both the zoo maps, but also having a cohesive area to the zoo. So certain animals are part of a different area. It would sort of be like the work zone, but I feel like it would just be great to have areas identified as an exhibit, and so guests will be looking for those animals in particular. And I think that would just be really nice to have animals that guests are looking for in a habitat, or in an exhibition, that, yeah, it just flows nicely. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on that as well. Now, another one that would be a great way to incorporate the educators a bit more is classrooms and school visits. This is something that a lot of zoos have. Schools will visit zoos all the time. You'll be going around the zoo and there'll be a school trip going in, and many do have classrooms, as one of the main jobs of zoos these days is to inspire the next generation to love nature, to want to protect it, to make sure it's around for the future. And Taronga Zoo in particular here in Australia, they do a great program where they actually have some immersive classrooms that house animals that are then brought out to help educate the kids about the habitat they're learning about, or just the general concepts they're learning about. And I think that would just be really nice to see. There's also certain special presentations that are given in classrooms, and yeah, it would be a cool feature and a good way to make the educator much more important to the zoo, as educators are actually a lot more important in zoos for this very reason. Zoo memberships and passes is something that exists in just about every zoo I know of, where guests they pay a fee, but then that's able to be an annual pass or a seasonal pass that is able to give them free access to the zoo for a certain amount of time. And the prices of these would probably be held under the tickets section of the main zoo menu, and so you give the guests that certain price, and like you can also see your zoo members. That would be really cool, being able to see who is a zoo member and be able to organize specific events for that. Yeah, and organizing specific guest events is something that I think would be really great for the game, because a lot of different events do take place, like business meetings, weddings, birthdays, all sorts of stuff happens at the zoo. And I think that would be a really cool thing to include here, and just give a way for the zoos to be that bit more realistic, as when you have a membership, prices are discounted for you if you have it. Encounters are available for a discounted price. You can even get like free photo opportunities with certain animals as well. So that's just a few of the things that memberships incorporate, and I think that would be really nice. The zoos that are built a little bit more vertically or have different levels, elevators and escalators would be really useful, especially if you're trying to just create an area that just goes down into another area. Elevators are part of that. It's not just all stairs and ramps. So elevators and escalators are part of zoos that are built on slopes most of the time, and also just exhibits that are multi-level, just as a way to get certain people down to levels easier if they don't want to do the hike. But also this would play into an accessibility feature that I'll go into a little bit later. I think that'd just be really useful in the sense that like they can just help guests get around much easier, and there's less obstruction to guest flow. Yeah, that's sort of the main reason there. Ambient animals would be really great as well. So something that Planet Coaster has is pigeons that just fly around. That would be really nice. And if depending on where you are, you have squirrels as well. And I think it'd be really cool to incorporate these sort of animals as those ambient species that are just around, but they don't do too much. So they're not really taking the place of zoo animals. They just do certain things around the zoo map, and that's all they do. I think it'd be really cool to see, as these animals do just wander into the zoo freely. And this could be a way that the peafowl is better incorporated, as peafowls are generally that ambient animal as well, where they don't require a habitat to be placed into. They can just roam around the zoo, and yeah, that'd be a cool feature. Zoo accessibility. So not everyone that comes to the zoo is able to explore it in the same way. So people that have disabilities, particularly mobile disabilities, will require different ways of getting around, like carts, strollers, all that sort of stuff. And so being able to provide that would be a realistic aspect of zoos, as they do provide these things like wheelchairs. And so, yeah, being able to accommodate for different guest types would be good, because you want everyone to be able to enjoy the zoo in however they like, and so giving everybody the opportunity to explore the zoo is really important. And last but not least is animal ambassadors. So these animals are the species that, well, these are individual animals that are selected for shows and classroom activities and those sort of things, where guests are able to meet with these animals. Animals have been trained to show guests what they do, and also just get them involved with nature a bit more. And these are also just taken around to public events as well, where they're trained to be able to interact with people safely, and also just show them why they're cool. I mean, some people know a lot more about ambassador animals than I do, and yeah, it would be a really cool feature to have certain individual animals be a bit more crucial to someone of the zoo's education than others, as they can be brought to the guests themselves and just be walked around. As a lot of zoos do have this, where animals will either be being carried by a keeper, or they'll be led around to walk around the zoo, and guests can come and interact with them, learn about them, that sort of thing. But that's all the managerial features and environmental improvements that I could think of. Let me know your thoughts on all of these. If there's any that you think I missed, please leave those down in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.